Hey everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I want to show y'all how I made the headdress to my Spyro the Dragon costume. So you can see here I started out, I did a lot of work that I lost the footage to, but I have painted some 50mm eyes using only UV reactive fingernail polishes, and I backed it with some of this packaging material, and I'm hot gluing that to a thermoplastic base that was molded over. It was like this Halloween decor, like a goat skull. This is 5mm foam that you can see I actually used the handle to my X-Acto knife to line up the holes that I've punched, but I had heat shaped it and punched holes, or rather punched holes and then heat shaped, and now here I'm hot gluing it to the base. And this is really behaving like it was something that I liked the way it was sitting on my head. It was generally the right shape and direction. I'm using more of that packaging material here now to buffer the clamp so I'm not leaving clamp marks in the foam, to let that to let that hot glue dry. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, it was completely, cured, and I could just take the clamps off. Now here I had used Kamui Cosplay's, one of her horn templates, but I highly recommend them. And I had spliced them in together. If you guys are interested, I could do a much more in-depth tutorial of how I made these, multi-horns. But yeah, just followed the directions for Kamui's pattern. I'm going through, I wish in hindsight that I had dremeled and filled the seams better, but at the time I thought I wanted more of an angular look. But so this is just how it played out. Here I'm using foam putty, which is very much like using marshmallow fluff. It feels like marshmallow fluff. To fill in those different cracks. I'm still experimenting with foam clay and different things to see if I can find something that I really like. I used a bit of scrap foam to fill in the gap between the two horns, just so that I'm using a little bit less material. But I wanted something that would have a little bit of flex but would adhere nicely. And this was okay. It was $11 on Amazon, so I'm not that bummed out about it that it wasn't perfect and that it used so much. But and while I did that to the horns while they're curing, I'm using some hot glue and clamps and just some heads in the way. These are actually, I was using rivet setters for my leatherworking to hold the hole open for making the little folded over part. For all of the horns that we had made out of resin, which I'll show here later on. This will all start to make sense soon, I hope. Randy helped me out by drilling them, but we drilled those while that hot glue was setting up, and I'm pushing through using some elastic because at this point in the headdress, I still wasn't entirely certain how I was going to get it to fit onto my head in a way that stayed and was comfortable. So I'm using Bob the Skull, again, more clearanced Halloween decor. And my thoughts were on this, that I would have it interwoven through my hair, have my hair done up in a couple of different high and low ponytails, and have the different bands of elastic be secured to that. And now we're using the horns, lining each one up with a hole on the bottom, and we had drilled up into the larger ones. As I demonstrated with Randy helping me out, so that I could put LEDs up inside of them. At the time, initially I thought I was just going to be using LED candles, but fortunately I decided to make the leap into actually wiring up some of my own LEDs, and that really worked out fantastically. Now the way that we made these horns, you can actually see the white original mother mold, or I don't know, there's a word for it. The originals we had sculpted out of just white, polymer clay, just Sculpey. When I say weeks, it was me, and then my friend Zach had helped me quite a bit sculpting the horns, and then we made a mold with silicone and then cast resin into it. Now here we're using polymorph, which is very much like friendly plastic. It's a thermoplastic that heats up in water, freshly boiled water, which they're actually still pretty easy to touch, but very, very fun thermoplastic to work with. It can be tinted with alcohol inks. I had found you could also tint it with Sharpie and stuff. They paint up really nicely. But I'm just going through it. I'm making the teeth now, because I knew that I didn't have too much of a a design in mind, but I knew that the dragon was going to have a lot of teeth and a lot of horns, and to get them to be the same size, I was just using a teaspoon measuring scoop, and that way they'd at least, I'm not perfect at getting stuff to be symmetrical, so I thought, well, maybe, this is a step-ish in the right direction. And I just did that a bunch, you guys, because I didn't know what size and shape and where and how I was going to want the teeth. So I was like, let's just make a bunch of them and see how they fit in. And so we did. There at the end, I was using not like an eighth of a teaspoon, or at least a quarter of a teaspoon. Yeah, I think it was a quarter of a teaspoon for the smaller teeth, but it really did help to have a little bit of a root. It just gave me something to hold on to. Now here I'm using a product called Freeform Air. It's very much like Epoxy Sculpt, except for it's so lightweight, like incredibly lightweight. And I showed all of the mixing on this. Now this is sped up quite, I think 7 times speed. But it does take a lot of conditioning because you want it really well, well mixed. But it's not quite as sticky initially as Freeform or as Epoxy Sculpt is. So you can see it doesn't really want to stick to the thermoplastic base. I don't know if it would have helped if I had heated up the thermoplastic a little initially, or if I'd used some sort of spray adhesive, but maybe that's something to try for next time. But I just wanted to I had the bones and the key elements, which were the nose, which I had made out of thermoplastic that I had shaped over some mold, just modeling clay. And it cracked horribly and everything, but the modeling clay did, but it was enough to be able to shape the thermoplastic into the nose shape, so that I could have something hollow, because again, I really wanted this to be lightweight, because I knew it was going to be big and probably heavy anyways, but just the more ways that I could figure out how to cut back on weight, the better, I thought. So the little nose, the beak there, is hollow and made out of Terraflex, which is very much like Warbler. And if you have any experience with working with polymer clay or modeling clay or anything, the Freeform Air is very similar to those. It snakes out well, it sculpts nicely. Again, not very, sorry, I'm squeaking my hands across the desk, not very sticky, which that was actually made it, I didn't know if it would have been more difficult, if it would have been better or worse if it had been stickier, so there's no telling, but I liked it. It also did not help at all that I was stuck using large gloves, because I was all out of the mediums that I usually wear, so baggy gloves are super annoying. I did end up taking my gloves off for this sculpt, and I got a really bad rash over all of my hands, or yeah, all 2 of them. But I just wanted to kind of blend in and add little layers of detail to, make the dragon look a little less pieced together, blending in, the edges of the foam, nose ridge, and I've never seen a proper dragon, not in person, so I don't really know the anatomy or anything, but here I'm adding on some clay for the gums to kind of beef that out, because I didn't want it to look too alligator-ish. And again, something that helped me a lot in trying to keep things symmetrical was to have 2 similarly sized balls of clay before, take my one piece that I had mixed and then split it in half and then add one side to each face. Experimenting with using different tools. This is actually my first time making anything like this. So all of this was very experimental for me, but I did want to share that process with you guys, because I know a lot of y'all out there are very talented and probably have some tremendous advice, and I'd love to hear that. Down in the comments. At this point I was using just a 1/4 inch cedar. It's a leather working tool for hammering into leather, and the Freeform Air started to really stick to it, so I was like, uh-oh. And now I'm starting to place the teeth, because the Freeform Air had set up just a little bit, just enough that it didn't feel quite as much like marshmallow fluff. It started to have a little bit more substance to it, but it was losing its stickiness, what little bit it had. So I was like, oh, we got to go ahead and get the teeth in there. Now, some of the teeth did get wobbly, and I ended up using a gel super glue to adhere them in after everything was dry. But just getting that, like, a little root canal going to be able to smoosh those little teeth up in there. But it was, gosh, guys, this was such a fun project to make. Like, I can't even express to y'all how much fun I had just letting go and, seeing how it kind of came out. Because I wasn't worried about sticking to any kind of specific artwork or anything for the Spyro the Dragon. Like, I knew it wasn't going to be canon. I picked the color scheme and the fact that it was a dragon and just kind of went from there. Now, here, it's been about 6 hours. And the freeform air is stiffened up quite a bit, but it's still malleable. And I was using water, like, just out of the tap, just with my hand, and I was able to smooth out and blend all of my fingerprints out, all of the lines, and that really, I felt like, refined it quite a bit, and I really enjoyed getting to work with this, though the like clay water, like the clay juice that was resulting from rubbing water all over it, got all over my hands and gave me like a really bad rash that it took a couple of weeks to heal up. But they did have warnings and stuff on the container, so that was my own fault. But in hindsight, I do feel like it was worth it because it was so much fun. So now I'm using some thermoplastic to adhere the horns to the skull base. And this has been, you can see the sun is set, it's much later that day. I really only spent about, like, it felt like a week, but honestly it was probably closer to like 4 days on or maybe 2 weeks. I don't know. I don't know. I got lost in the process of making this, but anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks is how long I spent on this dragon head. Most of it honestly was spent waiting for stuff to dry, like waiting for the foam clay or the freeform air or something, like just waiting for that stuff to clear up and get to where I could handle it without having to worry about messing anything up. So again, just using little scrap strips of Terraflex, which Warbler mesh art would have worked really nicely for this also. And just, again, to try to achieve the symmetry, I was placing the thermoplastic up on the inside of the horn on the same, like, pattern piece on each side, which again helped me to just kind of keep things straight, splicing in little pieces of scrap here and there just to hold it stable. I had to kind of hold the horns off screen for like almost a solid minute to let the heat dissipate, so that way they were stiff enough that I could let go of the horns without it stretching out the thermoplastic underneath. And now we're mixing more freeform air. I used a bunch. I don't think I used up the whole container of freeform air, but I used up way more than half of it. Like, there's not enough left in the container that I would feel like I could do another project. Like even something small like a fairy house, I'd be like, nope, I'm gonna have to get more. But I don't know, I feel like 10 out of 10 would work with again. I really, really enjoyed the freeform air. It doesn't crack when it dries or anything like that. I really enjoyed working with it. So, and now I'm just rolling out some little logs and stuff, just trying to get the eyeballs to look like they belong there a little bit better than just being buggy-eyed, like, kablam, dragon eyes. And anything that I do to one side, I immediately do to the other. Again, symmetry doesn't come naturally to me, and so I have to be very diligent in like, okay, I did that to this side, now I got to do that to that side. Because even if I felt like it looked a little bit wonky, at least both sides will look a little wonky together. I'm coming through and just shaping an eyebrow ridge. I'd originally shaped some like scrap, brain fart, just some scrap foam, like some closed cell foam. EVA foam, is that what people call it? I don't know. It's like Silly Winks. Although some of it I gotten from Hobby Lobby and some of it I had gotten from TNT Cosplay. And I'm not gonna lie, I was really, really pleased with with all of the results, but I ended up covering up those original foam eyebrow ridges. And now I'm going through and just shaping some little horns with the freeform air. It sticks to itself pretty well. Like, it doesn't stick to other stuff tremendous. Like, it's not like sticking to my table or my work surface too much. It does stick to some of my tools if it starts to build up a residue. So it does stick to itself pretty well. But I still went through with like a ball stylus and tried to incorporate those pieces on because I didn't want stuff just falling off, of like I don't want one of his like eyebrow horns to just plunk, fall off. And just adding a little bit of texture with the ball stylus and trying to not bend the shapes out of anything. And something that helped me with getting the horns to be the same size was starting with like just little balls of clay. And so that the two largest horns, I had two like big balls of clay. And then for the medium horns, I had two medium. And, and then after I had established the gradient of large, medium, and small balls of clay, then I went through and sculpted them into horns. And that helped me a lot to, again, try to keep that symmetry going. Using my my fabric tape measure to take some measurements and make little like ear wings, kind of. I don't really know. Like they're like a little ear fin using an acrylic sphere. There will be links to all the different tools and materials that I'm using, or at least most of them, down in the video description below. But I was just heating it up with a heat gun. This is 3mm, I think, 2 or 3mm craft foam, and just heating it up with a heat gun like that really made it much more malleable. So I was able to pinch with my fingers and then pull and get it to do that little curved shaped thing that it's doing there. And now we get to decide where on the head we're going to put it. And here I have a paintbrush, just a paintbrush with water, and that helped me to define lines and do things that my fingers won't kind of fit in there and get that shape and everything. So I really, really liked having the paintbrush on hand. Building out the beak just a little bit more. I'd put a glob on there and I didn't get footage of all of it, but because it was out of frame. But I just kind of shaped and pulled that one glob around to cover up all of the thermoplastic of the beak because I wanted the same textures. So here you can see I've taped off with masking tape and foil all the parts that I didn't want Plastidip to get on. And then I sprayed the bottom, turned it over, and now we're spraying the top. Sorry, I lost the footage also of the adding more freeform air to around the horns. But I just generously Plastidipped everything. And here we're testing. Ooh, shining a little LED diode through the back of the eye. So this is how we made the horns. Just a 2-part epoxy. I had used Art and Glow, though I do prefer Liquicast 325 because it only has like a 10-minute pot time, or rather a 2.5-minute pot time and a 10-minute cure time. This stuff had 45 minutes pot time, but takes 24 hours to cure. So it was very, very frustrating to cast all of the horns for this piece. I had mixed in some glow pigments from Art and Glow, and then some alcohol ink. So you can see I have them beside me like curing, and I'm going through airbrushing with just regular folk art. I think this was like plum or amethyst or something. I just airbrushed it on. I just watered it down and airbrushed it. It worked fantastically. Now I cleaned out my brush, or my airbrush, and here I'm doing a base color of an opaque yellow airbrush liquid. And I just wanted a nice vibrant undercoat. Because now here you can see I'm going through and using, it's a Lumiere paint by Jacquard in their Sunset Gold maybe, or like Aztec Gold, I don't know. It was one of their golds. And just painted over all the yellow and all the stuff that I wanted to be gold toned. Because I know that Spyro the Dragon is like more purple and yellow, but I really liked how it translated into reality with that nice shimmery metallic gold. And it took like a whole pot of paint to do this costume. Not just the headdress, but like all of the different parts. And I'd gone through and done a little bit of antiquing, as you can see. And now we're unmasking all of the horns and things. And the eye. which this was so much fun to do, you guys, to like unveil it, because at this point I had put so much work into this piece. I was like, oh god, I hope it comes out good. Using just some matte black acrylic paint to darken in some of the details. And it glows, it fluoresces. And I'm going through and adding in some black just to blend the pieces together around the different horns and things. And I'd added a bunch of spots that were like, the spots on the face are made out of more freeform air and more scrap thermoplastic that was heated up and balled up before, applied before airbrushing. Now here I'm actually using, it's a UV reactive nail polish, the same stuff as what I used in the eyes and on the horns, but I let that dry. And going through with that same black acrylic, and I felt like that made such a difference in just helping things pop. And I really enjoyed those final details. It's a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie, but all of this was, and it was worth every little bit. Like, I'm still, like, at the time of recording, I had made this back in February. It's currently, like, June, like, late May, early June, at the time of recording this voiceover, and I'm still madly in love with this piece. I cannot wait to make another one. But, this is how the costume ended up coming out. Please stay tuned for more videos showing how I made the other pieces of this costume. But honestly, the headdress was my favorite part of it. And while I'm selling the rest of the outfit, I'm keeping the headdress for myself forever and ever. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or ideas, I would love to hear from you. If you have any requests for future tutorials, please leave a comment about that down below. There are links in the video description, like I had mentioned, about the different tools and materials. And then also, if you enjoy my free tutorials and you want to help support my work beyond just liking and sharing, subscribing, all that good stuff, please consider joining us over on Patreon. We do all sorts of different behind-the-scenes content and digital download templates for other crafters and stuff, as well as our monthly craft-along kits. So yeah, all the links for all that and my social media and stuff are down below. If you want to see more pictures of this, some of them are up on Patreon, but also up on Instagram. And until next time, y'all, thanks for watching and happy crafting. Bye.